taken out clips or little excerpts to read to you from this new article in the Intelligencer, and this is not like theories. This is full on facts brought to you mainly by a former Washington Post journalist. So this is a guy who devoted his life to your standard mainstream journalism. This is not just somebody's random blog. Intelligencer is a well-known outlet. And this is new information. I mean, information I didn't know. And I've read several of the books, one of the best being JFK and the Unspeakable on this topic. And I'm going to bring you some excerpts from this. This article, you're welcome to go read it. If you read it, it takes about an hour to read it. It's very long. But all right, so I'm going to do some reading, and I know that can be annoying sometimes, but trust me, this is pretty breathtaking information, and I feel like it's worth it, and I feel like you're going to appreciate it. So why the hell not? Let's do it. Via cryptic acronyms, the agency, and obviously anytime they say the agency, they mean the agency's routing slips recorded precisely who had been receiving information on Oswald in the period leading up to the assassination. Okay, so why is this important? Well, many people say, well, you're theorizing on this, you're supposing on that, you don't know what really happened. But this is actual receipts. This is you can look at the routing slips where information was going back and forth to the CIA. And you can learn a lot about what they were focused on, what they were paying attention to before and during the assassination. And so the article continues, a large number of senior CIA officers had evidently been tracking Oswald well before the assassination. Quote, and Morley is the name of the journalist who used to be with the Washington Post. Now he devotes himself to essentially just the Kennedy assassination. Is a quote from him. The idea that this guy came out of nowhere was self-evidently not true. So let's just for a second break that down. If the CIA was focused heavily on Oswald before the assassination, that means you've got two options. Basically two options. One is they knew that Oswald was important and he was up to something, or they were making him important and up to something, meaning they were working with him, but maybe there's a third, it's parsing hairs, but a third is they knew he was important because they were setting him up as a patsy, which is what most people know he claimed to be. When he was arrested, he said, I'm a patsy, and he was then shot and killed by Jack Ruby. Oswald's file contained press clippings, State Department archives, and FBI reports detailing his activities in Fort Worth, Dallas, and New Orleans when he'd been arrested in the summer of 1963 and interviewed at length in jail by an agent of the FBI. There was also a series of CIA cables the month before the assassination pertaining to a trip Oswald took to Mexico City. So the CIA is carefully monitoring where Oswald is going. Isn't that odd? If they had no idea that this guy was up to something or they weren't up to something, they wouldn't have known anything about this guy or cared much about him. He would have been a random dude, right? And we were told that. I mean, I wasn't alive, but we were told that after the assassination, we were told, oh, well, it's a random dude shot Kennedy. Yeah, we were just finding out about this guy, Oswald. And by the way, I should throw this out there. Some of you may not know this, that after the Warren Commission claimed that it was just lone gunmen, there was a church committee hearings later in the 70s, and they did not find that it was a lone gunman. This is actually the U.S. government found that there was a conspiracy involved. They didn't say who. They just said Oswald and a conspiracy. So our own government has admitted that there was a conspiracy somehow involved in the assassination of Kennedy. They just don't admit whether it was and they will probably never admit whether the CIA was involved. Continuing from the article, by the Warren Commission's determination, Oswald arrived in Mexico City on September 27th. This is several weeks before the assassination. So this is before anyone supposedly knows anything about Oswald, right? Random dude. Before his return to the U.S., he goes down to Mexico. Before his return to the U.S. 6 days later, he made several strange visits to the embassies of the Soviet Union and Cuba. So he goes to Mexico, again, several weeks before the assassination. The Warren Commission could not definitively establish that the man who presented himself at the embassies as Oswald was Oswald. A surveillance photo of a man outside the Soviet embassy, noted by the CIA as being Oswald, was clearly not Oswald. The Mexico mystery man has never been identified. Okay, so let me show you these two. These are the only photos I'm going to show you. But so there's a photo of Oswald on the left. Ignore the guy on the right for the moment. The photo of Oswald is on the left. That's what he looks like. And here is the same document, just farther down. Here's the guy outside the USSR embassy in Mexico. That dude, for those of you listening to the podcast, looks nothing like Oswald. Not a modicum of resemblance other than brown hair. Like, completely different dude. You like 100%. And yet the CIA initially said this is a photo of Oswald outside of the USSR embassy, the Soviet embassy. And you're like, why would the CIA ever try to tell us this is so clearly not Oswald? And again, this is before the assassination. So a random dude is, if you were to ask the CIA, they would tell you that this guy, who they have a photo of, was going around to the embassies in Mexico, Cuba, and Soviet Union. I think he was saying he wanted to go there to travel to them. And he was saying his name was Lee Oswald. So to continue from the article, a CIA wiretap had also picked up someone presenting himself to the Soviets as Lee Oswald. But those who later heard the recording, including FBI agents, said the caller was not him. Okay, so think about this. Before the assassination, you have a fake Oswald going to these embassies. We have a photo of this fake Oswald, who's clearly not him. We have him, a clearly not him voice saying he's Lee Oswald. So, A, why would the CIA be tracking this before the assassination? B, why would anyone, Oswald or otherwise, have a fake guy go down to these embassies? In my mind, and the mind of many others, there's only one explanation, which is they're trying to create a history, a backstory for the man they are going to pin the assassination on. This is just weeks before the assassination. And if they can say, hey, this guy was a communist, he went to the Soviet embassy just weeks earlier in Mexico, then it certainly works a lot better to say that's why he killed the president. He's a communist and he hated JFK and he wanted to work or did work with the Soviet Union. There are recordings of the phone calls of President Johnson in which he made clear that it was of paramount importance to show that Oswald had no ties to either the Soviets or the Cuban allies, so as to avoid, quote, a war that can kill 40 million Americans in an hour, nuclear war. So this raises the question, and this is not in the article, this is my own analysis. If the CIA sent this fake guy to Mexico to lay a trail of Oswald, trying to get in touch with the Soviet Union and Cuba, if they went to that trouble, why then would President Johnson say it's imperative that he not be connected to Soviet Union or Cuba? And I think what it shows is that you have multiple factions here in the U.S. government working at different angles. And, people argue about whether Johnson knew that the assassination was going to happen, whether he was in on it or whatever. I don't know the answer to that, but I will say that the CIA clearly was, in my view, clearly involved, as I'm showing right now. But you could have different entities in the U.S. government, some of them laying a trail to pin it on Oswald. And then once it's done, once JFK is dead, there's many others, because obviously the number of people that were involved in this that knew of it probably is pretty small as they could get it. And so you have loads of others that are not in on it. They don't know of what's just happened, the truth behind it. They may have suspicions, but that group of the ruling elite does not want a nuclear war with Russia. And so they're actually saying it's imperative that he not be connected to the Soviet Union. So a few days later, this is from the article, a few days later, a friend told Bringerer that Oswald was nearby on Canal Street handing out pro Castro leaflets saying hands off Cuba. Bringerer went to confront Oswald. The men were arrested for fighting. Okay, so you have a CIA group going down to fight a CIA patsy, both of them members of essentially fake, either fake or CIA created groups. So it's essentially the CIA fighting itself and getting arrested for fighting itself. And so they get arrested, and they then, the two of them that fought on the street, then go on television to debate the issue. There is a televised interview of Oswald claiming to be part of a group that doesn't exist, debating Bringerer, who's in a group the CIA created and funded and manages. On TV, pre-assassination. I mean, so mind-blowing. All right, so they get in this fight. They're arrested. Oswald asks to speak to an FBI agent. That's what you do, and the FBI often agrees, right? When you get arrested for a fist fight, and you just go in and say, "I'd like to speak to an FBI," and they're like, "Absolutely." So he gets an FBI agent, and he took pains to explain that he was a member of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. He kept telling him, "I'm a member of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee." Think about it this way: if you were the CIA planning to assassinate a president, well, you need a patsy, you need a fall guy that everyone believes did it, but you need that person to be defined. If that person is only defined as, we don't know his history, but he might have been CIA, then that's not good. Even if that person is not defined, except, I don't know, he used to be in the military and then he's just kind of strange, it leaves too much open for interpretation. Instead, you need to define him. You need to set up a way that people go, oh, turns out he's a communist. He's a commie, and we can prove he's a commie because A, B, and C. So what would you do if you were getting ready to assassinate the president and you wanted to set someone up and you wanted to create a situation where the world would think this guy was a commie and that's why he killed the president? Well, you would need public interactions that witnesses could say, I saw this, I heard this, I spoke to this guy, down the list. Well, boy, Oswald has a lot of public interactions on that front. He's handing out leaflets, getting in fights with another CIA front group. He's telling the FBI agent that he demanded to speak to, I am with the Fair Play for Cuba. An impersonator goes to the embassies in Mexico and says, I am Ali Oswald and I want to go to the Soviet Union. Very public, aggressively public stuff. Right before this guy goes to kill the president. The other thing is, these are not the actions of a guy getting ready to assassinate the president in a very well-planned assassination. These are the actions of a guy who's either completely, unhinged, or someone who's been told to make public interactions. And in fact, we know the one in Mexico was not even him. And so all of this, screams, hey, CIA assassinated Kennedy.